mine. This is all stay on by. On the front. On the front. Mine. Stay on by. On the front. The pie. Singing upon my mind. Stay on guy. On the front. Once upon a singing of my mind, I'm a stay on guy. On the Friday, watch my time say young. We go to the bonfire mine, same old guy. On the Friday, that's good. Set the fucking dogs off. Oh. Same old guy. On the Friday, I say I. To pint. I say I. I say I. But on a day. Same old guy, but on the Friday, same old guy, but on the Friday, my baby comes a pint, I say I am inside. Shut up, yeah. Shut up. Stay-home guy. But on the Friday, my family comes apart. I say I'm up on my mind. But on the Friday, my family comes apart. I say I am on my side. Stay-home guy. Stay-home guy. I'm a stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I will outside mine. Outside mine. I'm a stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I will. I learned more about something. Outside mine, outside mine. I'm a stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I really don't go outside mine. It was by I say I really don't go. It was by I say I really don't go outside mine. It was by I say I really don't go outside. It was by I say I really don't go outside mine. It was by I say I really don't go outside mine. I'm a stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I really don't go outside mine. Stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I really don't go outside mine. I say I really don't go outside mine. I say I really don't go. I say I really don't go outside mine. 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 I really don't go outside mine. I'm a stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I really don't go outside mine. I'm a stay-home guy. But on the Friday, it was by I say I really don't go outside mine. It was by I say I on the Friday. It was by I say I really don't go outside mine. Bleed the bleed the bleed. Bleed the bleed the bleed. Okay. Hello. Yeah, so much better. Dun, 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 dun. Sitting by my window, watching the moonlight in my home. Suddenly my mind was burning with desire, just like I knew. So I got a phone call to put out this fire running in my soul. On fire running in my soul. Only you, baby, can put out this fire running in my soul. Oh, only you, baby. Only you, baby. Only you, baby, can put out this fire running in my soul. Oh, don't do so I gotta. Yeah, sorry about that. Friday. It was by you talk about the same guy. But on the Friday, it was by you talk about my mind. Hi, testy boy. Well, that's not happening anymore. That's not happening anymore, love. Sorry. No, sorry. That's not happening anymore, love. It's not. Okay. I'm the same guy. I'm the same guy. I'm the same guy. I'm the same guy. But on the Friday, it was by you say I'm the same guy. I'm the same guy. I'm the same guy. Oh my god, I'm so full. I'm the same guy. But on the Friday, it was by you say talk about my mind. It was by you say talk about my mind. Beat the beat, the beat. Beat the beat, the beat. Talk about my mind.
To some, the release a few hours ago of the Google image editing upgrade, codenamed Nano Banana, will already be proof we're not in an AI bubble. You can see the mostly accurate new shadows and the attention to detail, like the little metal part on the bench. In the AI studio though, I asked for one flipper against its head holding an iPhone and things weren't quite as good. You could say it's a true Photoshop replacement if you don't look too closely. But on the AI bubble point, for those of a more factual inclination, there is the rest of the video. Because this is about the coming months and years of our lives, and the CEO behind ChatGPT did seem to say that AI is a bubble. And there was indeed an MIT study published in the last few days that claimed that the vast majority of AI investments were yielding zero return. Stocks did go down, context got lost. But I've read a dozen papers, studies and articles released on the topic of an AI bubble in the last couple of weeks, so I've prepared 8 points to consider as we all evaluate whether AI models have indeed prompted us into a bubble. And yes, have no fear, Nano Banana will return. Point number 1 is that Sam Altman didn't actually say he thought AI was a bubble. That was an editorialized summary by the Verge journalist of his statement that investors are, quote, overexcited about AI. Sam Altman said, when bubbles happen, smart people get overexcited about a kernel of truth. On AI, he said, are we in a phase where investors as a whole are overexcited about AI? My opinion is yes. Is AI the most important thing to happen in a very long time, he added? My opinion is also yes. We'll get to whether CEOs like Sam Altman actually understand their tools or can be trusted in their statements, but let's first have some context about his observation of investor overexcitement. You've got to remember that Sam Altman's former chief scientist at OpenAI fired Sam Altman, his name is Ilya Sutskever, then left to form Safe Superintelligence, valued at $32 billion with no product. Maybe that's why Sam Altman thinks there's investor overexcitement. Then there's Sam Altman's former CTO, Mira Murati, who was his brief replacement as CEO when he got fired and who now runs Thinking Machines Lab, valued at $12 billion, also with no public product. I wouldn't be surprised if that's also what he's referring to when he talks about investor overexcitement. Point 2 is that the media can't claim to have foreseen an AI bubble if they have predicted a bubble every month for years. Let's take the Wall Street Journal, who a year ago said that OpenAI's revenue is at least $2 billion, and the company thought it could double that amount by 2025 this year. They added that is still a far cry from the revenue needed to justify OpenAI's now nearly $90 billion valuation. Now remember that, a prediction of $2 billion going to $4 billion this year, and here's the Washington Post earlier poo-pooing the coverage and excitement about OpenAI hitting 100 million users. The headline was of an AI hype bubble, and they said that this is just website visits, not official monthly active users. Okay, well, what's the update as of August 2025? OpenAI has hit 700 million weekly active users, so much for 100 million being overblown, and it's hit 12 billion in annualized revenue, so much for 4 billion being overstated. I do appreciate some of the analogies to the .com bubble, but while pets.com is a dead link today, I don't think chat.com will be 20 years from now. Point 3, there have been 3 recent studies that have added fuel to the claim that AI is a bubble. Yes, I've read them all, but for your own sanity, I'm going to massively condense the findings into a series of pithy comments, as is my style. The first is a McKinsey study cited in the New York Times that 8 in 10 enterprises are not seeing measurable increased profit as a result of company-wide AI projects. The detail there is important. Company-wide AI projects. First problem, the actual study cited was done during the pre-reasoning paradigm of AI in mid-2024. Problem 2, the whole McKinsey study read as more of an advert for the case studies where AI did have a big profit boost, when coincidentally, enterprises had worked with McKinsey. Of possible relevance here is the fact that AI consulting is certainly boosting McKinsey profits. See this Wall Street Journal article on that making up 40% of McKinsey's revenue. The second most quoted study in the headlines was one from MIT, which was more thorough and seemingly more recent. They surveyed 153 senior leaders at 52 organizations. Now, it does say, in fairness, that just 5% of enterprise projects are getting all of the value, and the vast majority make no impact, positive or negative, on the bottom line. The ones that do well, apparently, are those that focus on business outcomes rather than software benchmarks. But the far more interesting part is the more nuanced point that the study is making, which the headlines miss. I think you guys will quite like this, because the paper says, while official company initiatives, that's why I emphasized earlier company-wide projects, official enterprise initiatives remain stuck on the wrong side of the Gen AI divide. Employees, on the other hand, are already crossing it through personal AI tools. I think the next sentence is crucial. This shadow AI often delivers better return on investment than formal initiatives. Translated, when people like you use your own AI workflows to boost productivity, you become more reluctant to use the company AI tools. Furthermore, this shadow usage creates a feedback loop. Employees know what good AI feels like, making them less tolerant of static enterprise tools. In short, the benefits you do get from using AI in your work is often invisible in the data. Bosses might ignore that when it comes to looking at who to hire and fire. Or in more formal terms, the Wall Street Journal puts it like this, in an article titled AI's Overlooked $97 billion Contribution to the Economy. And that, by the way, was 2024, might be closer to $1 trillion this year. What the hell is this invisible surplus? Well, it's what you would pay to access AI above and beyond what you actually pay. Think, in other words, of what you would pay for your current tools not to be taken away from you. That might be slightly more than the $0 or $20 a month. That's the consumer surplus that we're talking about. Add that up for an entire economy and you do get $100 billion, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars. Back to the bubble point, that means if your definition of AI progress was insane GDP acceleration, as one of the only remaining OG members of OpenAI's board predicted would occur, that's Adam D'Angelo, he expected up to 50% growth per year. Well, if that's your definition, then that perception is a bubble that has burst. Before we leave that MIT study behind though, 2 last quick clarifications. I think it's worth the time given the millions of people who read read the headlines that came of it. The first is that if you dig into the appendices, you'll see it was asking about projects beginning in January 2024. You may remember that it was September of 2024 that the reasoning paradigm burst onto the scene with O1 Preview from OpenAI. Coding with AI a year ago was pretty awful, but now it's a completely different story. Still not perfect, but way better. And yes, I do say that in the full knowledge of that Meta report showing that on massive code bases with early 2025 models, the impact is pretty mixed for coders. If you're curious about that, check out my interview with the lead author of that study on Patreon. Second quick clarification, the authors of the MIT study were encouraging the use of an AI agent framework, Nanda, so had some reason to suggest businesses were not yet deriving tremendous value, a bit like McKinsey. The study did make brilliant points about the current lack of memory and adaptability in real time of models, but offered its framework as a potential solution to those very problems. Just something to bear in mind when you read the headlines. Fourth bit of context on the AI bubble question, which is on the nature of incremental progress. If you look at each week's progress in AI, it can seem like small steps forward, somewhat akin to this new Helix walking demo from humanoid robot makers Figure AI. Slow but somewhat ominously inevitable progress. Everything seems incremental, but on the other hand, if you were only shown the progress in AI at the end of each year, I think you'd be less inclined to think of AI as a bubble. And on that year-end point, I don't just mean on benchmarks like my own, SimpleBench, which Elon Musk seems to have picked up on as a marker of Grok 4's improvement. You might not know, but SimpleBench is basically a private test of logical reasoning, and each generation of models does outperform the last, except for Claude 3.7 Sonnet randomly, but anyway. No, I'm talking about things like the MMMU, testing models' ability to navigate charts, tables, and technical diagrams at almost expert level. You could literally just take a snapshot at the end of each year. Let me try and do this. It's the bloody American dates. What is that? 23rd of July? Okay, so we've got, what is that? 38%. Then we go forward a year and we're on 68%. Forward a year and we are on 83%. I notice on the left it says ensemble of human experts medium 82.6, so we're ahead of that, and top human experts 88.6. Trust me, I know some of these benchmarks are brittle, but if I only gave you those 3 data points, you'd be like, wow, that's pretty good. To be honest, I kind of think of benchmarks as a bit like being photos of a music concert. They can give you a snapshot in time of model performance, not really an immersive experience of it. What would you have said this time last year about Genie 3, which enables you to step into and explore your favorite paintings, as one commentator said? Sometimes I think we're also dopamine addicted to the next release, that if 2 weeks go by without something major, we're like, man, AI winter, it's all over. I'm not even going to get to the near expert level speech transcription we now have in 2025, VO3, lifelike speech generation, song generation, or even real world impact. Well, I kind of lied. I am going to briefly touch on real world impact. Already, systems like AlphaEvolve from Google have saved Google 0.7% of their worldwide compute resources. The key was that the language model could get feedback, so it kind of knew when it was hallucinating or when it was on to something good, and it could iterate rapidly. There was so much real-world impact with its automated solutions that the bottleneck actually became manual experimentation. When I look back for this video, I couldn't believe that that paper was in May. It felt like years ago. And stepping back, there's just so much to take in each week that we even ignored the official passing of the Turing test in March. Humans literally could not tell in written conversations whether they were speaking to another human or the recently retired GPT 4.5. Speaking of seeing the human behind the screen, that reminds me of something. And I'm going to do something that I very, very rarely do on the channel, which is talk about something that isn't all about AI, just for maybe 30 seconds, because the other day I met up with 11 young medical students on electives from Palestine. They were incredible people, and most of them are using language models, by the way, to revise and become better doctors. They are from the West Bank, so they do currently have access to basic resources like the internet and food, which is not the case in Gaza. So massive shout out to the Jenin lads who might be watching, and any of you guys that I might see at the next protest march in London. Now for point 5, and if you thought that so far in this video every bit of AI that I've mentioned was just a flashy demo, Well, then you have to have an answer for the reasoning breakthroughs of the last 10 months. Because in mid-2024, it appeared to be the academic consensus that models couldn't reason. What you're seeing is a classic block swirl challenge in which the goal is to get the red block on top of the blue block. And people said, well, yes, they could memorize word sequences to solve such basic Lego-like scenarios. The data backed that up, and you can see Gemini 1.5 Pro and GPT-4o scoring around half or less on this challenge. Back then, though, if you switched the words around, so the logic was the same, but the words didn't really make sense anymore, model performance dropped off a cliff, as you can see. That's the mystery block swirl challenge. This was pretty nailed-on proof that language models couldn't reason and would never be able to reason. This study was cited by, among others, Yann LeCun. Here's an example, by the way, of this more abstract challenge where you have to understand the patterns behind the words, not just memorize the next word. I don't know about you guys, but I would find this really quite hard. Then, somewhat out of the blue for the authors, one of whom I interviewed, along comes o1 Preview, which gets almost 53% on this mystery blocks world. The authors had to rename language models to language reasoning models because they could, in fact, decode such jumbled abstractions. Likewise, this challenge, ArcAGI-1, which I did a video on back in the autumn, in which models couldn't predict what would come next in this sequence. It held out for almost 6 years, and even, by the way, held out against o1 Preview, but fell to o3, the precursor to GPT-5. The author of that benchmark says it's not just brute forcing it. These capabilities are new territory, and they demand serious scientific attention. Francois Chollet, by the way, now believes that fully human-level AI will arrive by 2030. But the point is this, we've come a long way since ChatGPT in November 2022, and it's easier to point to flaws in current models than design a benchmark that will last even 18 months at the current rate of AI progress. If you think you've found a slam dunk thing that AI can't do, make a benchmark of it and see if it lasts 18 months. Because whatever layer of abstraction you add, LLMs seem able to climb up to it eventually. Now, it's true that deriving new physics or inventing brilliant new literary genres may require a mountain of such layers, something that's a real uphill climb to incentivize in training. As the rich air, you could call it, of genius level data gets sparser, I think, the further up you go. There's another problem though. These language models are preternatural pattern finders, but their intelligence is not perfectly analogous to human intelligence and is not as efficiently derived. Thank God a baby doesn't demand the same kind of energy, or at least wattage, as the frontier models do to train. And prompting models at inference time demand similar resources to both training them and experimenting with new ways to train them. It all comes from the same compute, so AI labs have competing demands on bottleneck resources. Serving more people sometimes literally comes at the sacrifice of making a smarter model. But while we're on Sam Altman, let me turn to point number 6, which is that the CEOs of these labs have so much to do these days that I wouldn't be surprised if they have somewhat lost touch with the models they're creating. And it's not just Sam Altman who oscillates between saying that AI might generate OpenAI $100 trillion and that there's investor overexcitement, as you saw at the start, between saying that he feels the AGI with every release and admitting that the GPT-5 rollout was a fiasco. You know what, though? It's not only him. You've got Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, who I remember distinctly saying that progress would be slower in 2025 than it was in 2024. But then Google DeepMind went beast mode after that and started releasing eye-opening models almost weekly from around, I'd say, mid-June. He clearly didn't know what was coming. He would never have said that. Then there's the CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, who said recently, I get really angry when someone's like, this guy's a doomer, he wants to slow things down. Why would people say that he wants to slow things down? Well, let's look at a transcript of one of his earliest interviews on the subject in 2023. Sorry for the transcript text, but Amodei repeatedly said that he didn't want AI acceleration. You may not know this, but Anthropic had a model, Claude, before ChatGPT and could have released it first. Just after that decision, he said, yeah, we didn't want a big allowed public release that might accelerate things so fast that the ecosystem might not know how to handle it. Later on, he said, given the rate at which the technology is progressing, there's a worrying aspect. On balance, I'm glad that we weren't the ones who fired that starting gun. I could go on and on about the changes in sentiment of these CEOs, but I guess let's just cut to the point. My only point is I would forgive a lot of people for thinking that the CEOs will be the most informed about these AI models, but they're often not. Pay more attention to the top researchers at these companies, not necessarily the executives of the companies. Seventh, if you remember, I started this video by saying that stocks went down and that's what those articles were about. Well, that's true, but they're back up again. Stocks are going to do what stocks do. Which brings us to my eighth and final point, because even researchers don't know how many layers of abstraction an LLM can be made to think in. And so the leadership of those companies definitely don't know, and the media is almost like headless chickens. The very same outlets that argue that AI is a bubble report that the job impacts will soon be grave. Of course, I get that these news organizations are not monolithic, but there's somewhat of a contrast in those 2 points. But honestly, even for those of us who pay attention, for every benchmark that shows an incredible new ability, like that of being able to predict the future, can't cheat on that, at increasing accuracy, see Profit Arena. Currently, they have GPT-5 High as being the best at predictions. There are papers at the same time, like this one, exposing how basic visual tricks fool even the best LLMs of today. Will the gold medal accumulating unreleased reasoning model of OpenAI suffer from the same hallucinations? Or perhaps the forthcoming Gemini 3? We shall probably know by the autumn, which may bring us a new step change in performance as last autumn did, or may not. I would certainly be skeptical of anyone who says they are certain either way. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you think AI is a bubble. I'm off to play with the image editing tool from Gemini, Nano Banana. Have a wonderful day.
There have been extrapolations from rodent studies on very deep mechanisms of how protein can potentially activate certain pathways that reduce lifespan. We've studied just godless numbers of people at this point, studied a lot about their protein intakes and their lifestyles, and are now having really, really good data because some of these folks are quite old and starting to croak, unfortunately, of like, well, are the people that have eaten the most protein over the lifespans dying the soonest? Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for the RP Strength YouTube channel where you go to look at RP strengths and YouTube or something. Anyway, is too much protein killing you? Yes, stop eating protein now and start throwing it up if you had it just recently. No, hold on. I'm reading the slides wrong. It looks like there is a contention that I thought was already dead, but it's not. And not even close. So the contention is that protein could be bad for you, and a lot of people still believe it. To put it more formally, according to some researchers, even, not just lay people, over the years, protein that is high in your diet, in high amounts, consistently especially, might be destroying your kidneys, might be leaching away calcium from your bones and making your bones more brittle. It might be increasing diabetes risk, and it might be increasing all-cause mortality on average and thus reducing how long you live, which is really what killing you part means. And the thing is that we've heard this stuff for years. An article here or there, a news story here or there, a high school nurse's claim about, you shouldn't be eating too much protein. High school nurses, you guys are great, but some of you have not updated your insight on protein and creatine and a few other things in a long time. And I don't mean to zoom in on school nurses, just as an interesting example, kind of to illustrate this kind of all around. And definitely people's parents and all that stuff, and even your doctor might think these things. But as the esteemed Menno Henselmans, who is an amazing follow on Instagram and a phenomenal follow on YouTube, I highly recommend him, pointed out recently in one of his Instagram posts, a group of researchers decided to actually ask the question of, okay, like for real though, how true are these claims under a real microscope about protein being bad for your health in a variety of ways? And these fine folks authored one badass review paper, which we're going to be looking at today. Let's take a look at it and see if you should be buying life insurance soon. Ooh. So the study is called The Harms of High Protein Intake. It's a really fancy study name. The Harms of High Protein Intake, Conjectured, Postulated, Claimed, and Presumed, but Shown. Maybe. And so this is by Stephen French and colleagues. Phenomenal review. So let's start off just by talking about what the big mystery is. Like, what is this study trying to resolve? Protein has become kind of the nutritional hero of marketing departments and Jim Bro lore over the past many years. And yet for more than 60 years at this point, academic papers and popular articles alike have at times and places warned that too much protein will do all kinds of really bad things to you. It'll wreck your kidneys, it'll leach calcium from your bones, it'll shorten your life, tip you into diabetes, and so on and so forth. And the authors of this study basically say that, like, these are conjectured harms. People think they're likely harms through reasoning. But there is a striking lack of convincing direct human data, which doesn't mean that these things are wrong. It just means we can't be so confident that they're correct. And also what these study authors have shown before writing their review is that in some cases, the evidence for protein's harm actually leans in the other direction. So it's not only that for some things, hint, hint, bone growth, that protein doesn't really harm bone growth, it seems like, but it actually, a few studies, pretty convincing ones, show that protein might enhance bone growth. Okay, so like if we're claiming that protein's bad for your bones, but the net aggregate of literature, as far as these guys can just vibe out, says that shit is for sure not true, and it might be true in the opposite direction, we have a little bit of a problem. So what these guys are doing is asking a very important central question here. Are any of these alleged harms actually supported by solid science? Or are we kind of like shadow boxing with urban legends here and there's actually nothing real here and we're just BSing ourselves? Which I might add does happen all the time. It happens all the time. Do you guys remember, like, Scott, you remember 5G? It was supposed to like do bad things to you.
Yeah, like kill your brain cells or
yep.
whatever.
And it turns out like all of the evidence over the entire course of studying electromagnetic wave interactions with the human brain at those distances show that absolutely nothing happens. And we were like, so why did we bother with the 5G at all? This is super ubiquitous. A lot of people think stuff is harmful when it's not. And a lot of people think stuff is not harmful when it totally is. Cue drinking all the way up until a few years ago when people really started saying, it seems like it's pretty bad. So in other words, if you zoom out from single mechanistic studies that say, this mechanism could, in theory, in a big actual person over the course of their life, hurt them, and honestly cherry-picked anecdotes as well, do real-world data show that high protein intakes are dangerous in healthy people? Because sometimes folks are like, well, kidney disease, you can't have too much protein. They're like, okay. But you told your 15-year-old kid that wanted a mass gaining powder in your doctor's office last appointment that he shouldn't be having too much protein because it's bad for your kidneys, okay? Does that kid have kidney disease? The doctor's like, well, no. All right. So when we zoom out, what is the deal with protein? Let's take a look at how these folks went about studying this, because boy, oh boy, did they get into it. They looked across more than 60 years of scientific published literature. That's a lot. That's highly unusual. And all this literature was in high protein diets in adults. Very specific. And it is what's called a narrative review. So they collected a bunch of data and they did a lot of inference about it. And then they kind of draw a conclusion. It's not based on quantitative analysis, which is a downside because quantitative analysis can be more rigorous, but is also an upside because sometimes quantitative analysis can show you things in aggregate that aren't even really true individually or shouldn't be assumed from the data, but the math stops mathing super well and then you end up with wacky results. So narrative review at least is a review that can do first and can really, really instruct if further quantitative reviews like meta-analyses and comprehensive literature reviews can be more effectual if you even need to answer the question still. Because sometimes narrative reviews, like you read like 18 studies and 16 of them say this thing works this way and 2 of them are like, we're not sure. You don't really have to do a comprehensive lit review to be like, this thing probably works like this, man. It's not rocket science. Now, some things, they're more nuanced and more controversial. Then you need more of a fine tooth comb. And what they did was they basically first took a look through all this research, and they identified the most frequently cited harm domains like bones and kidney disease and so on and so forth. They took all of the evidence and they rated it on its strength and consistency. Like, how strong is the evidence that your kidneys get hurt by a lot of protein consumption? And is it consistent? Like, does it keep coming up? Or is it like, well, one study back in 92 found it and no one's been able to replicate it, even though the 92 study was really, really strong. And then they highlighted common design flaws, and there were many. Some of them include very short trials, so you really can't even understand what's going on yet. The experiment was way too short to conclude much. Confounding, like sometimes people will say, oh, protein causes weight gain and fat gain. And you're like, well, isn't that just because people who eat more calories than they should also tend to eat more protein? And that actually is the answer. So the calories confound the protein situation. There's a reverse causality where you think something is, the protein is causing some kind of like malfunction, but it turns out the malfunction is actually causing an aggregate series of effects that end up being like, oh, these people also, because of that, tend to eat more food. Like the dysregulation of appetite due to obesity causes people to eat more of everything, and then they eat more protein. And so I say, oh, protein causes obesity. Like, no. Obesity causes you to eat more protein. Like, really? I've never heard that. Like, well, yeah. Scott, have you ever seen people who are obese be like, hey, I'm overweight and I'm eating way too many calories, but I got to cut this protein down. That's ridiculous. They, if anything, would eat more protein because they're like, well, isn't that like healthier? Like, yeah, than what you're eating, but at a hypercaloric diet, you still get super unhealthy. So the reverse causality is something really, really have to be careful about. And kind of egregious animal to human leaps, sometimes cell to human leaps. They'll say, okay, in this one pathway, we found that excessive amounts of protein can cause this one pathway to act in a way that if it happened in every cell of the human body for 70 years, it would reduce your lifespan. Like, okay, so how do you guys know that? Like, well, we studied like some yeast cells. Like, okay, so don't eat too much protein because it's going to kill you. Like, whoa, hold on a second. Does that scale to humans? We looked into it. It doesn't, by the way. And sometimes they just don't put that part down. And so there are these massive animal or cell or like tabletop science experiment leaps to, oh, in actual humans, it's cool to make leaps like that as conjecture. But sometimes when your conjecture is tested, as in this article, it doesn't come up to muster. And so the health outcomes they tended to scrutinize here were things like kidney function, bone density, osteoporosis risk, type 2 diabetes, metabolic markers of just metabolic health overall, and then broad longevity indicators like all-cause mortality and lifespan proxies. Like if you have high blood pressure, you're probably not going to live as long, so they test things like that, so on and so forth. And there are, I would say, 4 key insights that we can get from what these researchers found, and they're a very big deal. Get ready. Here's the meat and potatoes, folks. In kidney stuff, in healthy people, glomerular filtration rates rise transiently with more protein. So they go up as you have more protein. You have less protein, they go back down. This is a totally normal adaptive response. There's actually no way for this not to occur because if you put more amino acid byproduct digestion throughput through kidneys, they have to work harder. What the hell do you think that they're doing? But long-term decline in renal function is not demonstrated in any of these studies remotely convincingly. Some of this research is 60 years old. If protein was hurting people's kidneys, we'd probably know about it by now. And it looks like it just seemingly doesn't do that, which is a very, very interesting, good piece of news. Next, number 2, bone stuff. The popular idea of that, so proteins are composed of amino acids, so they're net acidic. And they said, okay, increase in acidification, we know in some situations and contexts can lead to bone loss, which is true. But that story goes on to say, okay, it's amino acids, like, okay, acid, okay, bone loss. Okay, so protein causes bone loss, which I think you might have heard before. I've certainly heard before. The first time I heard about it, Scott, I was like, out of thin air. I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, isn't it bad for your bones? And I was just like, you know, like when you think you're an expert and someone gives you like, an accusation or a hypothesis that you didn't even plan for, you were like,
Yeah.
That's a thing I should be caring about? Like, it's someone's like, you're eating cherries and they're like, whoa, you're going to go blind. You're like, I am? Like, oh, do you know, like cherries make you go blind? They have some chemical. You're like, I didn't know that was an accusation. I guess that's a thing. And so that story ignores the fact that your everything that you eat gets buffered by the gut. And it turns out that the amino acids are, surprise, anabolic and help the osteoblasts, which are the cells that grow bone, actually do a better job and grow themselves and thus grow more bone. And long-term epidemiologic data on hundreds of thousands of people over decades and decades shows neutral or even positive associations of protein intake with bone mineral density. So that means you can forget about protein for the time being. As a scientist, you have to say, maybe we'll find something different later on down the line. There's a very good chance that protein does not hurt your kidneys. There's a very good chance it does not hurt your bones. With me so far. Okay. What about diabetes and metabolic risk? Like, I thought protein was healthy. What the hell is this? Observational links between total protein and diabetes, which there are absolutely links, correlation. People who, on average in the United States and Western Europe, eat the most protein, not very small groups of people like fitness people, but over the whole general population, also tend to have the worst kidney and metabolic disease risk outcomes. And when you look at those links, they actually disappear or reverse when two things are controlled for. One, adiposity. So if you're really, really fat, then it is true that excess protein causes more dysfunction because it just contributes to excess calories and makes you even fatter. And you already have all these bad things. And because you weigh 300 pounds, you have a higher appetite. You eat more of everything. You eat more protein. So you go, oh, wait. So these guys eat more protein and they have worse kidneys. But the same exact relationship is seen with Diet Coke. Scott, have you ever seen that diet soda and obesity direct correlation?
Of course.
Yeah. Like they'll say, oh, diet soda, the people who drink diet soda are the fattest. Like, yeah, that's why they're drinking diet soda, because they're fat. They won't want to be fat anymore. It's like saying, like, you know, the people that have casts on their legs have the highest fraction of broken legs. It's the casts that break their legs. Like, no. They got broken legs first, then the casts got put on, which is why it's a really high correlation. You get fat first. Sure, shit, not diet soda is not number one priority there. And then when you're fat, you start to get in, no offense, people, when you're fatter, you start to get in more diet soda to try to help it. But for maybe forever or for a really long time, you're still fat. So the correlation is massive. And genetically, like whatever, skinny people, they don't drink diet soda. Sometimes they don't drink soda at all. Sometimes they have like one Coca-Cola Classic that's not diet per day. And it just doesn't make them fat because it's not enough calories. So same thing with proteins. Like when you're big and you go to, I was going to say Logan Paul's Steakhouse. That wasn't it. Scott, what's one of those roadside steakhouses on the freeway? Texas Roadhouse. Texas Roadhouse. When you go to Texas Roadhouse and you're a big sumbitch, you ain't going to order like one little teeny steak. You're going to have a big steak and that's a lot of protein. And so people are thinking, it's the protein that's making you diabetic and out of shape. Absolutely not true. And when calorie intake is controlled, the entire relationship goes away as expected, right? And interestingly enough, intervention trials where they take two groups of people and they're roughly identical and they give one group some diet and they give another group that's a diet is essentially identical, but also just has more protein in it and less fats and carbs. More protein in a diet over months of time shows better glycemic control during weight loss. So it actually, protein, especially in a weight loss context, has an anti-diabetic effect. I mean, imagine if you thought protein increased your risk for diabetes and you go to the store to try to shop for your new weight loss and a diabetes reversal diet. I don't know what you're buying. I guess veggies and stuff, which is really good, but like you're leaving out a thing that can help you in every major respect and does not increase diabetes or metabolic risk. Protein does not increase diabetes or metabolic risk. It arguably reduces it in context of a weight loss diet. Number 4, longevity. This is the big one. This is maybe why you clicked on this video. There have been extrapolations from rodent studies on very deep mechanisms of how protein can potentially activate certain pathways that reduce lifespan. Absolutely. But these haven't mapped cleanly onto human cohorts. We're just not seeing the same thing with humans. And prospective studies simply fail to show shorter lifespan at the protein intakes common to athletes. So we've studied just godless numbers of people at this point, studied a lot about their protein intakes and their lifestyles, and are now having really, really good data because some of these folks are quite old and starting to croak, unfortunately, of like, well, are the people that have eaten the most protein over the lifespans dying the soonest? And body weight and calorie equated? No. The answer is just no. So if you suspect that protein is somehow making real people in the real world live less long, you have a very big problem of explaining why that does not seem to be the case in real people living less long in the real world. So sometimes mechanisms are awesome. Sometimes they don't peter out. This is one of those that just didn't make any sense. The common thread here that many protein is harmful narratives and the papers that push those narratives, not to say that they're like willfully ignorant or stupid or something like that. These are folks just giving their best opinions. Many of these papers rely on surrogate mechanisms like mTOR activation for longevity, which is very, very slight relation. And they don't corroborate clinical endpoints. It's like, okay, did these people actually demonstrate weaker bones after 16 weeks of eating higher protein? Well, we didn't look into that. Like, okay, so you can't be super sure. Or they studied them on populations with pre-existing disease. Like if you take obese, overweight people with metabolic dysregulation, then you're going to find some wacky stuff in there that just might not apply to the vast majority of people who eat protein and ask about it, which are people like me and like you and maybe even like Scott, the video guy, who just are normal folks trying to get their protein going so they can a little bit more swole, pump a little bit more blood into those veins, and have that one girl by the squat rack notice the senpai a little more. Did I do a good job of the anime thing? Scott, you love anime. What do you think?
I'm currently looking for a waifu.
Yes, my man. Excellent. And so the authors actually described the evidential stack of protein harms as wanting. And that's science speak for being a little curt and having a few lulls at a few people's expense. So what does this mean for me, you, everyone, protein-loving fitness people and lifters the world over? The safety envelope looks very roomy. They have tested months-long studies where people ate up to 2 grams per pound per day and per pound of body weight. So people who weigh 200 pounds have eaten like 400 grams of protein per day for months and months and months. And they had no adverse hepatic, which is liver, or renal, which is kidney, or lipid, which is blood fat, and overall health changes when they were doing resistance training as adults. So the idea that like, oh, well, protein's going to kill you. It's like, well, sure, shit must take over multiple months, and there's no directionality to it taking multiple months. Let me give you an alternate example. When you take higher doses of anabolic steroids, multiple months of you taking them, your blood work just gets worse and worse and worse until it stabilizes at really bad. And really bad blood work means you're slowly decaying under the hood. Even if it stays a certain level of bad, you run that over years and years, you're going to have a bad time. And so you can say, okay, steroids don't kill you in a few months, but directionally they make your body so unhealthy that they're going to kill you sooner or later. With protein, we don't even see that directionality. So if someone's like, well, protein is going to kill you eventually, and you're like, okay, so is it something that happens over like years? We simply cannot detect over months. Nobody really ever answers that question, by the way. Now, there's still a performance upside and an outcomes upside. Higher protein diets support lean mass retention during fat loss dieting. They support muscle mass gains, and they are just awesome and not unhealthy for you. So you're like, okay, higher protein diets are awesome, but they seemingly don't have all these downsides that people think. This is already great. Now, before I leave you guys, I have a few kind of practical guardrails here to talk about. If you already have kidney disease, you probably know that. Stay close in medical follow-up. And all this data is on healthy kidneys. You have kidney diseases between you and your doctor to negotiate how much protein is a good idea for you. Less of a negotiation and more of your doctor telling you what to do. Always, as always, keep the rest of your diet healthy. Keep them, veggies and fruits high, micronutrients really high, fiber high, stay hydrated. And that way, take care of your gut health, take care of your whole body. So just because you have protein in your food doesn't mean it makes it healthy food. You can also have healthy food with protein, and then you're really winning on all grounds. And of course, calories still matter. Like if you have a crap load of protein in your diet, then plus the carbs, plus the fats, if you're gaining weight and getting unhealthy from that, you can't be like, well, it's just protein, yes, but it all adds up. So other than that, the bottom line for us gym folks is that barring pre-existing pathology, like you have actual kidney disease, eating anywhere in the gram per pound plus or minus a considerable amount range is not only safe under current evidence, but actually may be low-key beneficial in a few ways other than making you more jacked. And so amazing paper by these folks. And a huge round of applause because this is a really awesome study. And if you guys want to go PubMed it, it's really easy to find just to search terms earlier. And Scott, can we throw this in the description maybe?
Yes.
Dope. And so the study is something that, like, you know, if you have a concerned parent in your social circle, if you have, you know, concerned medical professionals, or even just that aunt or uncle at dinner that just keep talking that shit, like, that protein is bad for you, just send in the PubMed link. And then, you know, it's an opinion piece by me on YouTube is one thing. You can send them this video and they'll be like, okay, that man's head is shaped weird and I don't want to hear about his stupid bullshit anymore. But a peer-reviewed article that is kind of avant-garde and the best review article in the space, that's a different kind of argument. Scott, have you ever seen anyone successfully, like a regular person successfully argue back from a comprehensive review of the literature?
No, absolutely not.
They just kind of shut up and don't say anything for a while and then pretend they never had that opinion. So send this article out. These guys need massive recognition. They're doing amazing work. As always, huge thanks to OpenAI for their suite of AI products, which helps me make these lectures in record time and helps me with research. Massive shout out to the RP Diet Coach app and the RP Hypertrophy apps. Then saying put that protein to good use and get jacked. Check those out, link in the description. And we'll see you guys next time. Oh, go eat some protein. Celebrate.
Protein and celebrate. Alright, that's what I did.